So we are going to look at the townlands tonight, that are the Dorsey Townlands and the surrounding area of townlands, because once you put in your boundary stone, then you're marking, you're going to have Dorsey on one side and you're going to have the townland you're going into on the other side of it. So it means that the townlands will have to, right around your own area, will have to be done. So just give me a second till I share the screen. Okay, and everyone can see the screen? Seeing that you're all muted, I'm hoping you can. Okay, so townlands. Well, you're bound to know that you're looking towards Slievegullin. And if this picture was widened out or coming back towards me a bit more, you're looking at Slievegullin from the Cashel side, just outside Mullaban, looking towards Slievegullin. So Slievegullin, the biggest mountain in South Armagh, 853 metres high, and Slievegullin known always through the stories of history as the magical, mythical mountain, mostly because of the stories of Finn McCool and Cuchulainn and Satanta and Cullen's Forge, all part of the South Armagh and the Slievegullin story. But just to put it in its context, and age-wise, Slievegullin is 60 million years of age. So 60 million years ago, the landmass that is America and Europe was joined together, and there was no Atlantic Ocean. And the earth sitting on plates, and those plates sometimes move, and they moved and divided the landmass, America to the left, Europe to the right, and opened up the Atlantic Ocean. And at the same time, it led to the formation. It threw up mountains right across the world. And for us, it threw up Slievegullin, which at that time would have been a much bigger mountain. But every ice age that came afterwards ate away at some of the height of it, as it did with mountains all across the world. And the last ice age that covered the island of Ireland was only 12,000 years ago. So that's not a long time, 12,000 in terms of history. So boundaries. Now, our oldest boundary are the baronies. Armagh, the counties of Ireland, are fairly modern. The first counties of Ireland formed by the Catholic daughter of Henry VIII, Mary I, and she founded Leishan Offaly, which was then Queen's County and King's County. And then the rest of Ireland, the boundaries of the counties formed by either Elizabeth I, the Protestant daughter of Henry VIII, or James I. So Armagh as a county was only formed in 1685. The old division of land are the baronies. There are two baronies in South Armagh. One is the barony of the Fuse Upper, and the dividing line is fairly much around that Silverbridge area. So Silverbridge going on towards Cullyhanna, Newton Hamilton, back round, Crossmaglen, Cullaville, Cregan, that area is the barony of the Fuse Upper. And the other part from Silverbridge going back towards Mullaban, Forkhill, Drummondhee, Killeavy is the barony of Arrier. So barony of the Fuse was ruled by the O'Neills, the great chieftains from Tyrone who came into South Armagh in 1480, and the barony of Arrier, the chieftains in Arrier were the O'Hanlons. So that's the division of the old division is. So you go from baronies into poor law unions. The poor law unions were set up in the early 1800s, and South Armagh is divided in between three different poor law unions, because the way the poor law worked was the building of the workhouse, and the workhouse in Newry was where Daisy Hill Hospital is now. So each poor law union worked on a 10-mile radius from its workhouse. So part of that Newry workhouse came into South Armagh. So from Anduff, heading back towards Newry, was in the poor law union of Newry. From Anduff on towards Cregan, Newtown, Cullyhanna, Cullaville was all in the poor law union of Castleblaney, and 9 townlands up at where I was reared, Tullydonnell, coming back towards Glasdrummond, were in the poor law union of Dundalk. So your area of Dorsey was all in the Poor Law Union of Castleblaney. Some of the area is in the parish of Cregan, some of it in the parish of Newton Hamilton. Now, these are not the Catholic parishes that you're living with now. These are the old civil parishes. The established church in Ireland, right up until 1865, was the Church of Ireland. So the parishes that the historical data is stored in the old civil Church of Ireland parishes, because the Church of Ireland parish was the civil parish. It was the government parish. So when you go back, it's not important for you until you go back to do historical research. And then you need to recognize that it's not the parish that you're familiar with, that it will be bigger than what you're familiar with. But yours all either lays in Cregan or in Newton Hamilton. So what I've done tonight is I've taken the Dorsey Townlands. There are, according to the historical research, there are 6 parts of Dorsey. There are 2 of them are actual townlands, and there are 4 that are only subdivisions, that they're not full townlands. But I've broken them up because people might like to know what they are and what's in them. For each townland tonight, I'm giving you the English form, and the English name is probably just, in some cases, a slightly different spelling than you're familiar with now, but it is the spelling that was used when the townland names were taken out of the Irish language. So it's the earliest English spelling of those townlands that's been used for the stones. So I'm giving you the English form, the Irish form, the acreages in each townland, what it means, when it first was dated. Now, when it was first dated doesn't mean that that's when the townland was formed. All townlands are massively important in the history of Ireland. It's the only place in the world that has townlands as a measure of marking land. There are 62,205 townlands across the island of Ireland, and roughly about 200 in South Armagh. They're all pre-Norman. So they're all coming from the 10th century. And in 1972, somebody sat in a government office with a red pen and put a stroke through what is or was 800 years of a heritage and started to introduce rural road naming, which was an absolute and total destruction of our townland system. So the townlands are massively important, but the dates that I'm showing you tonight are not the dates when they were formed, but the dates that they first appeared on maps. There weren't maps, there were very early maps that showed important places, and Dorsey is one of those. But then the mapping system, as it went on, became better, and they started to mark more on the maps. So you'll see a difference in the dating that I'm giving you for some of them. The Moira Castle over at the Gap of the North was built in 1601 by Lord Mountjoy, who was the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland. Built it there to show that the English had taken over the Gap of the North and Hugh O'Neill had been defeated. But travelling with Lord Mountjoy for his own protection was the mapmaker Richard Bartlett, who would have had been doing a lot of the mapping across the island of Ireland. And the maps were being created at that stage, not as much to give people direction, but as to create taxation. So Richard Bartlett was travelling for his own protection with Lord Mountjoy. He made a fatal mistake. He went to map Tyrconnell, or the county of Donegal, and he found out that the Donegal natives weren't going to be that keen on paying tax and didn't want their place to be mapped that much. So he never came out of Donegal. So we're starting off then with Dorsey. So as I said, I've split. Dorsey's a very big townland, and tonight I'm going to put it into its subdivisions and its two other, the 2 that are townlands aren't known by Dorsey. The ones that are subdivisions are still the townland of Dorsey, but we'll go ahead with it. So the large part of Dorsey, 1,310 acres, which is a big townland. Dorsey means the gateways or the doors, and it means that because Dorsey is one of the earliest townlands to actually be shown on the maps, because Dorsey has an immense history as being the gateways to Aaronwaha, to the headquarters of King Conor MacNessa and the Celtic people who were the big story for Ulster, which is where all your stories of Cuchulainn and are coming from the Ulster cycle. So Dorsey was first dated on a map in 1224. Now that's probably at least 400, well, not maybe 400, but well over 300 years earlier than any of the other townlands that are in South Armagh. So your history is an immense history. The other thing I'm doing with each townland tonight is I'm taking it back to the 1911 census, and I'm giving you the housing and the population and the religious denomination of each townland. Now, I'm taking the 1911 census because the 1911 census is available online. The first census of Ireland was taken up in 1821 and then taken up every 10 years afterwards, just as it is now. But this census material was stored in the Four Courts in Dublin, and the Four Courts was burned in the Civil War. So there is very little census material for the island of Ireland before the 1901 census, which hadn't been collated and put into the Four Courts. We are extremely lucky in the parish that I live in, because in the landlord's papers about 25 years ago, there was a complete 1821 census found for 14 townlands of this parish. Now, that's absolutely priceless, because there's only fragments of 1821 census anywhere on the island. So in 1911, that's the last census that we can view online. Census material is closed. The actual material itself is closed for 100 years. So we should have been due another census now in 1921, because we're in 2021. The problem being, as you know, in 1921 was the partitioning of Ireland. So there was no census taken up north or south in Ireland in 1921. So there is no census able to come online. The next census that was taken up, both north and south, was in 1926, because the Boundary Commission had fallen apart at that stage. So both sections, parts of what was the island of Ireland, took up a census in 1926. So there won't be another census available online to view until 2026. So in the main part of Dorsey in the 1911 census, you had 136 houses with a population of 575. 525 of them were Roman Catholic, 32 were Church of Ireland, and 18 were Presbyterian. The other thing to remember, it's a massive resource to be able to have that census material online, because you can go in and you can actually see the document as it was taken up. Now, if the person, it was taken up by the policeman arrived at every house on his bicycle. If the person who was head of family could read and write, then they filled in their own census material and signed it. So for me, I'm a grandmother. So for me, my grandchildren can go in and see a census for Kernally, because both of my great grandparents were born and in Kernally. So they can go in and see a piece of writing that somebody belonging to them actually wrote in 1911, which is a lovely thing to be able to do, sitting in the comfort of your own home. If they couldn't read and write, then the policeman filled in the census form, and at the bottom of the census form, the head of family made an X, made their mark, and then the policeman signed to say that he witnessed it. The other thing to remember and be careful of if you go in to look at the census material is that when the policeman came that night, he only recorded the people that were in the house that night. So if I was there going to do my census material and I had 6 children, but there were only 4 of them at home that night, he only recorded the 4 that were there. But if I had a neighbour woman in my house that night, he recorded her in my house. But it was listed as a separate entry on the census material. So you knew she wasn't of my family, but she was just in my house. But it definitely didn't record every member of the family unless they were at home. So they're just things to be careful of when you're going to look at them. The good part of the 1911 census, because it was a time of a lot of infant mortality. And it was also a time that people didn't talk of infant mortality. People sort of closed the door on that and bore their own sorrow themselves. It wasn't something that was openly discussed and talked about in the way that it would be now. So the 1911 census has a column in it that when you click on it, it will tell you how many children were born and how many children are alive. Because for some families, there were infants that had died that nobody ever knew about in the generations that went afterwards. So it's just something that adds to the story to be able to see that. So that's the main part of Dorsey. Now, this is Dorsey, Cavan, O'Hanlon. And these next 4 are not townlands, they're subdivisions. It's something that maybe you could look at when the townland stones are in, because the townland stone will be a stone that will cover Dorsey and its 4 subdivisions. But there is no reason why, if they're all in, that somebody then, that we couldn't get a small plaque or something that recognizes the subdivisions, because the subdivisions will be completely lost if they're not recorded in some way. So it's important. So Dorsey, Cavan, O'Hanlon, or Dorsey Roxburgh, took the name Roxburgh from John Johnson of the Fuse, who built his house in that part of Dorsey. And used the name Roxburgh because he had come from the Roxburgh area in Scotland. But Dorsey, Cavan, O'Hanlon is the old division name of it, and my people were from Dorsey as well. My granda never referred to it as anything, only Dorsey, Cavan, O'Hanlon. So I can't give you a date for that because it definitely, as a subdivision, came onto the maps much later than the actual Dorsey itself. And there were only 4 houses in it in the 1911 census, with a population of 17, 10 of them Roman Catholic and 7 of them Church of Ireland. So Dorsey, Cavan, O'Hanlon, well, I'm talking to Dorsey people, so you know exactly the bit I'm talking about. That is Dorsey, Cavan, O'Hanlon, or Dorsey Roxburgh. So it's up that main road when you're the road when you're going on past the chapel. Dorsey Herty. So Dorsey Herty, again, I can't give you a definitive date for when it was first used. What I can tell you is that Griffith's land valuation was taken up across Ireland between 1846 and 1865. And again, it was taken up for taxation purposes. But in Griffith's land valuation, those 4 subdivisions of Dorsey are appearing. So they were definitely recorded before the 1840s. That's as much information as I can get on that one. And in Dorsey Herty, you had 9 houses. a population of 31, and all of them in the 1911 census, all of them were Catholic. Dorsey Mullaglass, and again, it has 224 acres, and in the 1911 census, it had 9 houses with a population of 45, and 45 of them Roman Catholic. And Dorsey MacDonald, or now would be certainly known as Dorsey, as Carrickawadi, and you know again where it is. It's running on from that Roxburgh area. Dorsey MacDonald in the 1911 census had 26 houses, a population of 104, and 104 of them Roman Catholic. Now, Dorsey, the main Dorsey that I showed you at the very start, is in the civil parish, the old civil parish of Cregan. Dorsey Herty, Dorsey MacDonald, Dorsey Mullaglass, and Dorsey Cavan O'Hanlon was in the old civil parish of Newton Hamilton. So there's where you're getting a difference in how you go to research it and where you need to look when you go to do it. And these are the two that are townlands in their own right, and that's Finiskin. And Finiskin has 113 acres. It means the swift flowing stream coming from the Irish. It's dated, shown on the maps first in 1609, and a lot of the townlands in this area are coming in at around that 1609 time. And Finiskin in the 1911 census had 6 houses, a population of 25, and 25 of those Roman Catholic. And this other one then, Drumalt Drumalt means the ridge of the glen of the pigs. Drum in Irish is ridge, alt is the height. So there's where you're getting the ridge of the glen of the pigs. This one is down at the bottom of Dorsey on the old road that's taking you up to meet the townland of Camley, where Palmer's Mill was. And again, it's a small townland. It only has 64 acres and isn't dated on the maps until 1766. There was only one house in it. Now, when you looked up Griffith's valuation, the mill, all that was there was the mill and 2 houses that were Scotchers houses. And in that 1911 census, the man who's living in that one house that's occupied was a Scotcher. So a population of 7 within that house, and again, 7 Roman Catholic. So Drumalt is on the old road structure, the road that was known as the Ballymorna Fada, the Great Road of the Fuse. That's one of the last parts where you can see that structure in the right place, because it ran along towards Camley, and Camley was where Johnson of the Fuse had his barracks, but I'll go into that later. So that's the entire area that is Dorsey. The Dorsey itself, or the whole townland, is Dorsey, but with 4 subdivisions that we will mark in some other way, and then its own 2, the other 2 that are actual townlands. So I'm going to take you around on the other ones then that are going to form your boundaries, that are going to appear on your stones, just for information right around. So Umricam is meeting Dorsey up heading towards Silverbridge and running right along. And Umricam itself, 554 acres, and it means the Crooked Ridge. Now, Umricam is divided, again, it's one complete townland, but there are subdivisions within that townland. So there's Umricam Ball South, and Umricam Ball South is where the landlord's house was, the McGill Bond's house, the house that's still there, Silverbridge House, that Hughie Comiskey now lives in. That was the house belonging to the McGill Bonds. The McGill Bonds were landlords, and their main house was the Argery in the Mye in County Tyrone. They came into South Armagh. They bought 11 townlands, one of them being Dorsey. They weren't known as very good landlords in this area. And in the 1911 census, that's the only house within Umricam Ball South, the landlord's house and his 44 acres. And the population, no, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. I'll go back on that again. In the 1911 census, the McGill Bonds were gone out of Silverbridge House. That house was sold in 1908. They're in it. The McGill Bonds are in it in the 1901 census. Robert John McGill, and with him is a gentle, what is recorded as a gentle lady, a gentlewoman, who is obviously some type of companion of Robert John McGill, and she was a German lady. So they had sold the house in 1908, and that house was then bought by the Coulter family. The Coulter family were a Church of Ireland family originally from Glasdrummond, who had gone to England and had made substantial money in England and bought Silverbridge House, but didn't actually come to live in it until 1912. So at the 1911 census, Silverbridge House was empty, and it was only another house, a smaller house that had somebody. So the next part of Umricam is Umricam Johnson, and that's taking you back up towards the top of the Bridge Hill. That whole area is a part of Umricam Johnson. 396 acres, 25 houses in it, a population of 118, and 118 of them were Roman Catholic. And then Umricam Ball North. Now, the reason they're taking the name Ball is that the first man who got most of the O'Neill land, the O'Neills were the chieftains of the Fews. They had their castle up at Glasdrummond, and they were implicated in the 1641 rebellion. And at the time of the Cromwellian confiscations in 1655, the O'Neill land in South Armagh was seized by the government, by the Crown forces, and the beneficiary of most of the O'Neill land at that time was a man by the name of Thomas Ball. So that's why in several parts of South Armagh you'll see the Ball name coming up because he had been involved in it. So Umricam Ball North had 114 acres, 16 houses, a population of 62, and all of them, again, Roman Catholic. So that's one of your boundaries. You're going to be putting in a stone that has Dorsey on one side and Umricam on the other side. Just as I'm sure you've been down maybe at the bottom at the main road, and you'll see that on Saturday the Cullyhanna group, the footballers and the community had put in their townland stones, and they have one there that's Dorsey into Tulnaval. So the other boundary stone you'll have is Umranvor. Umranvor running again alongside Dorsey on the right hand side of Dorsey. Means the ridge of the road, and 210 acres in Umranvor, and it's not on the maps until 1834. So in the 1911 census, there were 11 houses in it and a population of 45, and again, 45 of those Roman Catholic. And further on up, you're going to go in from Dorsey into Tully O'Gallaghan. And it's a bigger townland, 501 acres in it, and it means the hillock of the O'Callaghans. This is the thing about the townlands as well. You'll see in different areas where you have the same prefix. The Tully is the prefix, but anywhere that you see Tully in the name, I was reared in the townland of Tully Donald. It means the hillock of the O'Donnells. So Tully is a hill in the Irish language. So once it's translated, it's going to mean the hillock of. Anywhere you see Liss or Rath in the beginning of a townland name, it means that there's a fort. There had been a fort area in that area, because that's what Lis or Rath will mean, coming back from the Irish language. Anywhere you see drum, it's going to be the ridge of. So you'll get to recognize the different prefixes. So it came on the map in 1766 as the earliest records, and in the 1911 census had 19 houses, a population of 97, and 97 of them Roman Catholic. You're going to hit again into Cavnakill, and Cavnakill is a big townland and a sparsely populated townland in the 1911 census, because it has 1,469 acres. It means the round hill of the wood. It's dated 1609. So again, as I said, there are quite a few have a 1609 date. In the 1911 census, it had 48 houses, a population of 225, and 171 Roman Catholic, 43 Church of Ireland, and 11 Presbyterian. And Camley's coming in when you're going off that road that is Dromaltnamuck, and going down, meeting the townland of Camley. Now, Camley again is a townland that had subdivisions, Camley Ball and Camley McCullough. So where you're seeing those, it's generally to do with another landlord coming in and taking a piece or buying a piece of that land. Camley means the place of the Crooked Hill. Again, it's a big townland, 1,468 acres. It's dated from 1609. So in the Camley Ball part of the townland in the 1911 census, there were 22 houses, a population of 85, 62 Roman Catholic, 12 Church of Ireland, and 11 Presbyterian. And in Camley McCullough, there were 39 houses, a population of 183, 58 Roman Catholic, 86 Church of Ireland, and 39 Presbyterian. Now, Camley, apart from being on the Ballymore Feda, is an important townland, because that's where the barracks of the Fuse was. And in the barracks of the Fuse, in the 1700s, was a man by the name of John Johnson. And John Johnson was High Sheriff of the County of Armagh. He took that role. His father had been High Sheriff as well. So when the first barracks was built, that was on the Ballymore Feda, it was in the townland of Claddybeg. Now, the Ballymore Feda ran, there were five great roads left Tara, the seat of the High Kings of Ireland, and one of them came north. And that road that came north was known as the Slieve Malucra. And at the edge of County Louth, coming into South Armagh, it divided, and it came into South Armagh in two parts. One that was still retained the name of Slieve Malucra, and it ran through the Gap of the North and straight on to where the international airport is now. The other one became known as the Ballymore Feda, and it came through from County Louth, down through that's what is the Silver Bridge area, down through Dorsey, on through Camley, out the back of Newton Hamilton, which is 9 Mile Hill now, and through those townlands on that top road and straight to Armagh City. So Camley, the first barracks that was built to protect that road and to protect the English forces was built at the townland of Claddybeg. And that townland then became derelict, and the next barracks that was built at Camley, just where Beggs's house is now, on that corner, was where the barracks of the Fuse was. And John Johnson, while he was there, was notorious, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, save us from Johnson, Lord of the Fuse. So he was High Sheriff of County Armagh. He was a rapparee hunter. He was a priest hunter. My people, my ancestors, rapparees and Jacobite supporters. Seamus Moore McMurphy, one of my ancestors, captured by Johnson of the Fuse and hanged in Armagh City in 1750. So Camley, because of the history that can go along with it, an important townland. Dorsey, an extremely important townland, because it brings us right back to the story of the Celts, it being the gateway to the Celtic people and the routeway. The stone that's at Thirmill Bridge up in Pat Duffy's field, Tulnaval Stone, Tulnaval Standing Stone, was undoubtedly what we would have, when we were growing up, there were markers on the road, directional markers, signposts. It would have been what were the early signposts. That was to let people know that we're on the routeway to Ironmaha, at the edge of the Dorsey, that they were on the right road and heading the right way. Tulnaval, and that stone is already in from with the Cullyhanna ones. So Tulnaval and Dorsey meeting there just at the Mill Bridge. 846 acres, and it means the hillock of the hedges or the enclosure. So there you are. Dorsey is the enclosure, the gateways, and Tulnaval was the townland that was beside it, the hillock looking into the hedges and the enclosure. And this is the important thing about the townlands. The townland names make absolute sense as to where they are. You know, I mean, and environmentally, and shapes and all of the things that were a reason to put that name on them. They weren't just plucked out of thin air and given a name the way the townland, the way the rural road naming was. You know, I live in the townland of Mafona, just right beside Mullaban School. Mafona means the plain of the beans. And that road that goes down past Mullaban School and meets the Longfield Road that goes into Forkhill moves from Mafona townland into the townland of Carrickildreen, which is the Rock of the Blackthorns. Now, if I ask a child, if you go to pull crack out of a child, the first thing you'll ask them is what their name is, and then you'll ask them where are they from, where do you live, and those children that now live on that road will say back to me, I live on the Bog Road. Now, instead of living in a place that's called Carrickildreen, because even if you took the history out of it, the sound and the music that goes with that name, and now that child is told it lives on the Bog Road, which is fairly uninspiring now. So Tulnaval on the maps from 1640, in the 1911 census, 60 houses, a population of 245. 229 of them Roman Catholic and 16 of them Presbyterian. And Dorsey comes across and meets up Lurgan-Columby, where Tulnaval goes into Lurgan-Columby, but Dorsey also comes up the side of it and hits into Lurgan-Columby. So it has 652 acres, and it means the yellow, long, low hill of Holly. Dated from 1657, and in the 1911 census had 51 houses, a population of 202, 198 Roman Catholic and 4 Church of Ireland. And Tullyvallen. Tullyvallen is the biggest townland in South Armagh. It has 4,500 acres of land. It means O'Mallon's Hillock. Again, you're coming to the Tully. And it has several subdivisions of Tippin, Hamilton and McCullough, the same landlord that had part of Camley. It's dated from 1609, and in the 1911 census, 190 houses and a population of 757, 116 of those Roman Catholic, 17 Church of Ireland and 439 Presbyterian. Now, I've taken the population figures of Newton Hamilton out of that, so I'm just looking at the very rural part of it. I did the population figures of Newton Hamilton for that group when we were doing them. So there you are. That's your townland of Dorsey and the townlands that surround it. And those are the names that, if you're going to put in the stones, are going to be on the reverse side of your Dorsey stone. So if you're looking to do research and you're looking to go into the townland and look for your own people, all you need to do is to type in Census Ireland, and that will bring you into the National Archives, and look for that name on it. On when you do the Google search and it throws you up a list of stuff, go to the one that says National Archives. It's a completely free website, because some of the websites, those ancestry websites, are places you're going to go into that they're going to charge you for going into them. But if you go to the National Archive, that's a completely free one. Yeah, you click on Armagh, which is your county boundary, and you click on which date, either 1901 or 1911, that you want to look at. Now, it's all in its townlands, but the townlands have been grouped together into what they call DEDs. So under a DED, you might find 6 or 7 townlands. And the trick is to go to a DED that's nearest to your own area. You'll recognize the name. So if you go in, there is one that is Camley that will have some of those townlands in it. There's one that's Dorsey that will have other townlands. So just go to the one that you can see that's nearest to your own area. And the first information you'll get is the families that are living in the townland. And you can get the original census material, and you can get one that's typed out that's showing you the same information but in a typed format. And if you click into the one that's on the typed format and go down to the bottom of that page, it will give you information on what the housing was like, the housing stock. So if you go into the form that's there as B1, it will show you how many houses there is in the townland, but it will also show you what the status of those houses were like, because what they looked at was whether your walls were built with stone or whether they were built with clay, and they gave it a number because of that. They looked at whether the roof was thatched or whether the roof was slated. They looked at how many windows there was, and they added those numbers together and they classified the houses. So you could have first class, second class, third class, fourth class. Fourth class was an extremely poor house, probably of one room or maybe 1 or 2 rooms with one front window and a thatched roof. First class took you to a different standing altogether. The house that had been Johnson of the Few's house in Dorsey, a first class house. Silverbridge House, that was the landlord's house, a first class house. I think there were a couple of first class houses in Dorsey. Hang on till I get my notes. But it was fairly, there was a house belonging to Mary O'Hanlon in the 1911 census. That was a first class house, and a house belonging to Edward Blackard. That was a first class house. So there weren't very many first class houses in any of the townlands, and it was usually if you're finding a first class house, it was a landlord's house or a house that were keeping that had slightly more money and were keeping servants and stuff in it as well. So that's how you do your research as regards the people and the buildings that are in your townland. If you want to do research that's looking at the actual land itself, then if you type in Ask About Ireland, and that this is Griffith's valuation, so that you can get Griffith's valuation for right across Ireland, again using your barony and your parish, and that will tell you who they call it the immediate lessor, which is the landlord. It will give you who the landlord was on each townland, and it will give you the amount of land that your ancestor was leasing. He was the tenant, and he was only leasing his land. He couldn't buy his land. Not until the Wyndham Land Act of 1903 were tenants in any sort of position to be able to purchase their land. And in that Wyndham Land Act, the landlord didn't actually have to sell. if he didn't want to. But the next Land Act that came in 1908, then the landlord was obliged to sell to the tenant if the tenant were able to purchase it. Now, what happened then as well was the government actually paid the landlord for his loss of revenue, because if the landlord sold the land, that meant he wasn't getting any rent from it. So the government paid the landlord, reimbursed the landlord for his loss when he sold the land to the people who were actually living on it and working on it. And then people had to pay ground rent back to the government for years to do that. The important thing about Griffith's valuation is that the number that was put on the plot of land in between 1846 and 1865, depending on what. Now, this area of South Armagh was mostly done on Griffith's valuation in 1863 and 64. But the number that was put on that land then has remained constant. So if you go to the land registry in Belfast now and you have the number of the folio, then that's the same number that was put on it in 1864, and the land registry will have a record of each time it changed hands, but the number of the land has remained constant. So that's a good way of being able to trace the changing of land right down from that time. So that's Dorsey and its surrounding townlands. So if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question or make a comment or anything before we're finished, you're very welcome.
Just to tell you, you have 3 great-grandchildren of Edward Blackard listening to you tonight.
Oh, lovely. That's great. Well, Edward Blackard had a first-class house in the 1911 census. I was just researching the whole thing the other night just to get information for doing that. And it was one of the things I was looking at, what was the housing stock like. And in Dorsey, it's funny, some of it is probably to do, Mary, with the fact that land was better. The nearer you came to Slievegullien, the poorer the housing stock was, which makes sense because the land was poorer. My father would have said, my father was from Kernally, born in Kernally, and there's a lovely story. There was an old man in Kernally, Ned McCann. He was known locally as Ned the Bones. And Ned had an extremely sharp wit. And you took him on at your peril. To start saying it to him. But he was in Glastonbury Hall one night and there was a ministry meeting there and there were 2 officials there from the Department of Agriculture. And Ned said, well-dressed boys with sharp suits and pens in their top pocket. So that put Ned on a side right away. So every time the ministry man was coming up with information, Ned was heckling him from the back and querying him. And eventually the boy got fed up of it and he said to him, Mr. McCann, is your land arable? Because this information night was about crops and stuff. And he said, Mr. McCann, is your land arable? He says, arable? Would you have a bit of it? He says, son, you'd break your back before you break your fast. It was all rocks. So, when I look at the townlands that are coming further towards the mountain here, the housing stock's poorer, that in a townland where maybe you have 15, 16 houses, there would mostly be 3rd class houses, maybe an odd 2nd class, but very few 1st class houses. So it's
not one of these grandchildren.
but it's
around the world are.
Yeah, but it's the amount of material now that's available online to be able to do that. That you could sit and you could do a complete survey of your housing stock right across South Armagh. Like it's that's amazing. The stuff we're a very lucky generation. I mean, 30 years ago you couldn't do any of this. unless you sat in Prony in Belfast. And when you go to Prony, well, first of all, going to the actual public records office, and I know things need to be preserved, but 96%, 95 or 96% of your population will never go to it. So they're excluded, even if they self-exclude, but they're excluded for one reason or another. And the other thing is, when you go to any of those places, you need to know what you're looking for. You can't, like, it defeats the purpose of it if you're not sure about stuff, even down to how well records are kept. I was down doing stuff for the priest here in Mullaban 9 or 10 years ago. It was the 150th celebration of the chapel in Mullaban, and I went to the O'Fee Library. And when I was down there, Brendan was getting stuff for me that I wanted. And he's a really nice man. I said to him, will you print me off the baptismal records for the Kellys in Umricam? That was my grandmother. And he said to me, yeah. I said, I will. Yeah, I'll do that now. And he said to me, there's 8 of them. And I said, no, there's 11 of them. No, he says, there's only 8 of them. He had the records in front of him. He says, there's only 8 of them. And I said, well, I have a picture hanging on my wall in the house, and there's 10 of them in it. And the picture was taken when a 4-year-old boy had been burned to death. So there were 11 children. But obviously some of the records were missing, or the priest just didn't write down that child that day. But the thing is that if I didn't know there were 11, the information I would take home with me that day is that there were 8 children. So there's always going to be a grey area unless you know your own family stuff in detail. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you can only do what you can do. So I suppose the next question is there volunteers or support there from the football club and the community to get these stones up? Because I have them sitting in cross, and I have the names gone in today, or went in today, to get them marked. So they'll be ready in the next couple of weeks to get them put up.
How many stones is there in total or not?
Well, for the Dorsey, for you now, on those, that would give us about 10 stones.
Not too many.
No, it's not too bad. No, you could do more if you want. Like, I mean, but I had a phone call the other day from, he said he probably wouldn't get on tonight because he has bad Wi-Fi. Jeff Quinn, is Jeff Quinn on the road that's now known as the Pulcone Road?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jeff rang me and said he would do the Umricam goes into Umranvor, which isn't really a Dorsey stone, I suppose. But he knows along there where Umricam goes into Umranvor, and he said if I get that one marked, he'll put it in.
Right. What about the marking of the where the bases are going?
Well, that would be the wee man with the shovel. No, the holes are, what I have now is I have the stones bought and paid for, and they're paid to be engraved. So the volunteers then will be coming up with a bit of cement, mortar, and a few shovels or a very small digger that would dig the holes and put them in.
Oh, that's not what I meant. Do you know what the actual position of the stones?
Well, I have given Pierce the townland map.
Very good.
You know, there's a South Armagh. There's a South Armagh map. Am I coming in now where you can see? This is the South. This is a map of South Armagh with the present roads, the present layout of South Armagh in its roads, and broken up, marked up into its townlands. Right. So I've left that with Pierce. Now that's a fairly good guide of where your townlands turn. But what I'm going to say to you is the person who will know best is the local person for getting it dead on. And the other thing is, you know, it has to go in a place that's safe. you know, that it's not a danger to anybody driving on the road or anything. So you're going as near your boundary as you can, with a bit of sense. Do you know what I mean?
Just, are we going to have a border commission on these stones?
Well, I hope it doesn't take as long as the last boundary commission, and it would be a bit more successful. Because they made some hash of the last one. If you make as big a hash in Dorsey as they made here, when you finish up with a road that's running from Dundalk to Blaney, that it leaves County Louth and it goes into County Armagh and then it goes into County Monaghan, and it's called the concession road because the government of Northern Ireland in 1921 gave permission for travellers to go on their piece of the road that was in County Armagh, provided they didn't stop. That's exactly how that road was named.
Yeah.
It was a concession given by the Northern Ireland government, allowing people to travel, but they weren't allowed to stop.
Have you set up a dispute mechanism about where each?
Well, I tell you, Mary, I have the stones and the names on it, and once they go into Dorsey, mea culpa after that. Any falling out there is after that will be among themselves.
Yeah, I can see there might be a bit of aggro as to where.
The other thing is that those are the four, those subdivisions. Your stones will be the boundary. So, but I still think that we need to then do something that recognises, not with a stone, but in some way recognises those subdivisions, because it's important. It's important to have them. You know, because people that were from Dorsey would have always talked about them.
Yeah.
You know, so it's important that they're kept. And it surprised me that, you know, that Drummond, Namuck and Finiskin were actually recorded as full town lands, because I expected, first of all, that there would all be subdivisions. Now, I suspect that there were other subdivisions, because I don't think Father Brian McCreesh is on here tonight. But he was certainly
he was to come.
Was it? He was certainly on the Cullyhanna night.
Yeah.
And he mentioned Dorsey Aidan Ashara.
That's right. Yeah.
I've done all of the old maps, and there is nowhere that name has come up. But it obviously was in the oral tradition of the people. You know, so it was talked about somewhere, but it doesn't. Those four subdivisions are on Griffith's valuation. So they were collated separately as regards the valuation. But
any idea how Dorsey Hurty got its name? I could be very wrong, but I never heard of any Hurtys in that area.
Well, it's a small, Dorsey Hurty's 249 acres. It may well have been, it may just well have been that there was a landlord, that it was subdivided, and that a landlord had come in there for a time, and that name stayed with it because of that. But there's no way really of knowing where that come from. Like, the whole thing was so haphazard, with townlands, you know, where like the townland of Carricknagavna was owned by the Buck Whaleys. The Buck Whaleys, the English family, they were first cousins of Oliver Cromwell's. They owned Temple Bar in Dublin, all the expensive parts of Dublin, and one feckin' townland in the middle of South Armagh. You know, I was reading Tullydonnell, and Tullydonnell was in two parts, two subdivisions, Tullydonnell Gage and Tullydonnell O'Callaghan. And Mickey said, shortly after we got married, Mickey said to me one night, I'm not going anywhere anymore with you and your father, because, you know, you have no interest in anyone that's living. The only place you go is graveyards. And he was laughing, like, he says, I'm not going with you no more. You can go on your own. But there was a girl reared at Silverbridge, and she married on Rathlin Island. She married an island man, and she was living on Rathlin. and she had been ringing mommy and said, you know, nobody ever comes down to see me on Rathlin. And we decided we'd all meet up, all my ones at home, and that was in different places. We'd meet up in Ballycastle and we'd go over on the ferry and we'd have a day on Rathlin. And Mickey said to me the night before, because he had been at school with her, was your father ever on Rathlin? And I said, no, he never was. And he says, well, I'll go too then. He says, because he'll not know anyone that's buried on it. And we were going over on the ferry, and Daddy leaned over and he said, you see the way the Gages owned half of South Armagh? And we said, yeah. And he says, well, they own Rathlin Island and they're all buried on Rathlin Island. And so they are. And they were military men that spent most of their life in the East. And they owned half of a poor, impoverished townland in Tullydown.
I met that woman on Rathlin Island too when we went over.
Kathleen McCurdy.
Isn't that right?
Yeah, Kathleen McCurdy.
Yeah.
She's dead. She died. Yeah, she died a couple of years ago. So the system, the landlord system, they sold one town, they just sold town lands. Like the McGill bonds to own 11 town lands. And sitting in the big house in Silverbridge, and you know, but there you are. So I'm leaving it with you then.
What do you need the community association and the footballers to do? Do you need us to like collate the volunteers' names?
Yeah, well, I mean, the easiest way, Leona, is if somebody, you know, somebody that's living near where a boundary is. I'll tell you what they did the other day in Cullyhan, and it worked really well. They went in on Friday evening and they collected their stones. And when they had all the stones on the trailer, they drove around the road. They had already been out and decided where each stone needed to go. Okay? When they had them all on the trailer coming from Crossmaglen, they drove around the roads and they dropped each stone where it was going to be set in on Friday evening. And then they came Saturday morning and there was people from each townland part right beside their stone were out, and they just dug the hole and they travelled around with cement and they got them all in. They put in, I think, 24 stones in a couple of hours. Okay. Because they just had it organised. You know, like there was no point in taking the stones home and putting them into somebody's shed and then having to take them back out and put them on a trailer again. So they waited till they were ready, where they had decided where they were all going to go. They took them in, they took them from Cross and dropped them in each place and then put them in the next morning. So that's, yeah, I suppose that's what I want the football club and the community association is, just to get a group of people that are willing to help to put them in and to buy the cement.
Well, I'm willing to help with the organising, but it wouldn't be much good with the cement or the shovel.
There's a lovely wee video was taken on Saturday morning, and there's three wee fellas. Their daddy's at the stone as well. There's 3 or 4 men at the stone, but there's 3 wee fellas in Cullyhanna jerseys, Cullyhanna socks, and one of them has a shovel. And every so often he's running with a wee bit on the shovel and putting it in, and the men saying, "Oh, you're a great boy," you know. And it's lovely. It's lovely. There was a great crowd of them out, and a great sense of, you know. And Balik did theirs on Saturday as well. Balik has their whole area done as well, up to meet, coming up to the Lisleigh area. The Lisleigh group's taking it on, and Camla was already done. Camla did theirs about 10 years ago. We did ours here in Mullaban about 17 years ago. So we're just going to join them all up and the whole area will be done.
Is Cam and Go going to get their headstones on later on, or do we not do them as part of the parish here as well?
Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, I'm getting at the minute, that's their names that are in. The whole Dorsey names, Cam, and for Cam coming out on the main road is already done, because we did it as part of the Mullaban parish. So you'll see one, there's been one at the top of the Bridge Hill for years, and that's Cargan and Cam.
Yes, right.
So it's the Umricam one then going down, back down the way towards Dorsey and into Umranvor. Umranvor is on the other side of the Anduff stone, going down from the Anduff side, because Anduff was one of our townlands. So Umranvor's on the other side of it, if you know what I mean.
All right. So it'll be all covered then once we do the Dorsey.
Once you get Dorsey out, Balik's out, Newtown then needs to come up, because you'll have Dorsey and Camley. You'll have Camley on one side of your stone, but then they need to do the other side, which is Camley going into Carrick-a-Cullion. You know what I mean? So Dorsey needs to come up, or Newtown needs to come up to meet you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
But if it's broken into small bits like that, you know, there's no way you could go out and do all of South Armagh. It needs to be broken in. The Cullaville footballers are coming from Cullaville in towards Cross. The Rangers are coming from Cross out towards Silver Bridge. The Silver Bridge ones then will take stones that are going back up through Tullydonald. The Glasdruman residence group have some of theirs in. That's Glasdruman into Lurgan Columby and Glasdruman into Mount Hill. And so they're working up that area. And the Jonesboro one started last weekend, and they've done Fiahal coming back in, coming towards Drummond.
Who let us know when the stones are ready, Una?
The stones will be ready in a couple of weeks.
Right. Will someone contact us, or
I will.
will it be yourself?
I'll contact you and let you know that they're ready.
That's 100%.
And what Ronan will do, they're in Burns' yard. What Ronan will do is he'll put your group together on a pallet, you know what I mean? So that when somebody comes in to collect them, they're not having to go through a load of stones. There'll be a set of stones that are the Dorsey stones.
Right.
And can you just give us a wee list before that, Una, of what the names on the stones, just as a reminder of.
No, Dorsey's not spelled wrong. Dorsey, okay. The old spelling of Dorsey is Dorsy. So before that, where's Aidan Moley? Before there's any more heckling, Dorsey's not spelled wrong. The E in Dorsey is a very modern way of spelling it. So what has been done is the Irish has been taken from the work that was done by Queen's University on all of the place names in Ireland, in Ulster, and the English form is the way it first appeared on the maps. All right. What, Aidan?
As if I would heckle you.
Well, you can't do any of this without a bit of banter, sure you can. So I'll let you know whenever they're ready, and we'll go from there.
Lovely.
All right.
Una, can I just ask you, you're recording that, you recorded the others. Some people have asked me if there's somewhere that they can get them, especially people in Australia.
I've recorded this tonight. So the easiest way for me then to work, and I recorded, what did I do last week? I recorded the
archaeology.
Yeah, I recorded the tour the other night. So I'm giving them, we're going to edit them, and they'll be on Teresa's website. You'll be able to download them from the Rural Health Partnership, because I have no website to put them on. So I put them on to Teresa. So I've recorded the Cross one, the Cross Townlands, the Newtown Townlands, the Cullyhanna Townlands, and these. So you can download any of them from there.
Brilliant.
Now there was a wee bit of a boundary issue now about Cullyhanna coming up into what might be the Rangers, you know, whether Tier was coming in under Cullyhanna or Tier was coming in under Cross. There was a wee bit of kerfuffling around that one. And I'd say there'll be maybe a wee bit between Cullaville and Cross, but we'll let them at it. Well, I know the stone goes in, I don't care who puts it in.
Yeah.
So Pierce has the map. I'm sorry, but the maps are not. Somebody had come back to me looking to buy the maps, but you can't. The maps were maps that the DOE did for me, because I was doing an education project in all the schools. So there was maps done to teach school, but they're not maps that can be sold. So I can't sell them, but you can hold on to the map that you have. And if you have anyone that has a big enough way of photocopying them, that's up to you. It's not my fault what happens to them once they leave me.
Well, I just want to say that you've done a great job so far, that all these, townlands, they're all getting their stones in. I think it's a brilliant thing to do. So, and a great achievement.
Here.
Only for you and it wouldn't be done. So, sure, Dorsey will get behind on with their shovels and their cement, and there'll be plenty of help out there to get them in, won't there?
Yeah, well, Terry Conlon was up on a digger when I went down the other morning. He was up on a digger at the side of Sheepthram, and I said, "Who in the name of God put you on a digger?" And he says, "Now you'll know all about it when you get the bill." So no bills. This after this now it's all voluntary. Look at it's it was a destruction what they did to start withdrawing the townlands and using rural road names. Like there was no reason behind it, and nobody will come out openly and admit it. But the reason it was done in 1972 was security. It was done by the Home Office. It wasn't. Royal Mail said it was needed to be done for post. It's absolute nonsense. It was security that was doing it. Because the only ones, the local people knew where they were. The only ones that didn't know where they were was the ones that was coming in. But that's neither here nor there now. The fact is that they need to be brought back, and they need to be, it's not even just putting up the stones, it's using your townland. If you want to hold on to your rural road name, but make sure that when you're doing it, you put your townland under it. That the townlands become used. They're no good just sitting on a stone. People need to be using them and talking to children about them and stuff like that, so that they become important again in their own area. And when the stones are in, we'll come up with some way of looking at the subdivisions and how we mark them or do something with them, because I think it'd be nice to do. Okay, nothing else, then we can close down.
Thank you very much, Una.
Good night.
That was brilliant.
Good night.
Thanks, Una.